The night air over Beaufort, South Carolina, had a salty tang from the nearby river, mixed with the faint hum of cicadas. September 3, 2005, began like any other late summer evening. But for 20-year-old Katrina Ellis, it would become the last time her family saw her whole and alive. Katrina had spent the afternoon helping her younger brother with homework and checking on her mother's garden, the warm sunlight casting her curly brown hair in soft highlights. By 7:15 p.m., she said goodbye to her neighbors, promising to run a quick errand at the local pharmacy. She never returned. For hours, her parents, Marlene and Peter Ellis, waited. Their calls to her cell phone went straight to voicemail. By 10 p.m., panic began to seep in. Friends and neighbors joined the search along the small residential streets and marsh trails surrounding their neighborhood. The Beaufort Police Department, initially thinking she might have simply stayed late with a friend, were called after Marlene spotted Katrina's purse abandoned near a side street. The contents were scattered. Her wallet containing identification and a small amount of cash lay open. A half-empty bottle of water had spilled into the sand. Her keys and phone rested in the grass. But Katrina was gone. Over the following days, Beaufort police assembled a search grid, enlisting volunteers to comb nearby wooded areas, low tidal flats, and abandoned warehouses. They traced her last known steps via ATM transactions, which had none, and phone records that ended abruptly at 7:23 p.m. Security cameras from the pharmacy showed her entering at 7:05 p.m., a brief exchange with the cashier, and then walking toward the parking lot. A dark SUV lingered near the curb, its driver partially obscured by the evening shadows. Forensic teams photographed everything, but no fingerprints or fibers that could identify a suspect were immediately found. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and Katrina Ellis's disappearance settled into a quiet dread that weighed on her family and the town. Beaufort, normally a place where everyone knew everyone, began locking doors and leaving lights on at night. Community vigils were held on the first Sunday after her disappearance, and the Ellis family distributed flyers featuring Katrina's smiling face, the same one framed on their living room mantel, her brown eyes seeming to plead for help from across decades. Despite exhaustive efforts, leads were scarce. Investigators followed dozens of tips: a red pickup seen near the pharmacy at dusk, a report of a young woman matching Katrina's description in a gas station 20 miles away, and even an anonymous letter claiming knowledge of her whereabouts. Each lead either dissolved into a dead end or proved false. In the absence of answers, the Ellis family struggled to maintain hope. Marlene spent sleepless nights revisiting the last conversations with her daughter, every detail etched into her mind. Katrina's favorite songs on the radio that afternoon, the bag of apricots she had insisted on picking up for her mother, the way she laughed when she tripped over the sidewalk curb. Investigators continued to preserve evidence meticulously, understanding that even minute details might one day become crucial. Katrina's purse, carefully bagged, remained sealed in the police evidence locker. Surveillance images were catalogued and enhanced using the latest technology available at the time, though the dark shadows in the frames obscured much of the potential information. The dark SUV remained a mystery, its make and model unconfirmed, no license plate legible. The first breakthrough came years later as forensic technology advanced. In 2018, Beaufort Police established a specialized cold case unit, supported by state and federal grants, aimed at re-examining unsolved disappearances from the early 2000s. Lieutenant Samantha Rhodes, a seasoned investigator known for her meticulous attention to detail, reviewed Katrina Ellis's file and immediately noted the dark SUV captured on pharmacy security footage. While the image was grainy, advancements in video enhancement could clarify shapes, reflections, and even potential partial license plates. Meanwhile, forensic scientists began revisiting Katrina's purse, examining the water-stained areas and her belongings for DNA evidence using new techniques unavailable in 2005. From the strap of the purse, they extracted skin cells, microscopic, degraded, but viable with massively parallel sequencing, a technology capable of generating a genetic profile from even a handful of cells. The profile was initially run through CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, but came back with no matches. Undeterred, Rhodes authorized forensic genetic genealogy, the process that had recently revolutionized cold case investigations across the country. Investigators uploaded the profile to public genealogy databases, searching for distant relatives who could lead them to the suspect. By January 2019, a partial match had emerged, connecting the unknown profile to a man with family roots in South Carolina. Rhodes and her team began the painstaking work of constructing a family tree, tracing relationships, marriages, relocations, and historical addresses. Each connection brought the investigation closer to the truth, narrowing the circle from dozens of potential individuals to one name that repeatedly appeared in local records near the time of Katrina's disappearance. Douglas Fletcher, a 39-year-old truck driver known in Beaufort for his quiet demeanor and routine trips along the same streets Katrina had walked that September evening. Rhodes requested surveillance and discreet collection of additional samples, observing Fletcher's habits and movements over several weeks. Investigators obtained discarded cigarette butts and coffee cups, all of which were analyzed to confirm whether the DNA matched the profile from Katrina's purse. In February 2020, the results came back. A full match. DNA from Fletcher's discarded cigarette butt proved conclusive. A man who had lived among the community for years, attending local events and passing unnoticed, had been hiding a decades-old secret in plain sight. Upon confirming the match, law enforcement immediately prepared for arrest. Fletcher was taken into custody without incident, appearing composed yet visibly pale, as officers read him his rights. Inside, he remained silent, his expression unreadable. The police had no doubt that the evidence they had amassed, video footage, DNA, genetic genealogy, and a pattern of movements matching the night of Katrina's disappearance, was enough to bring him to trial and ensure justice for the Ellis family. For Marlene and Peter Ellis, the arrest was surreal. They had spent 15 years hoping and praying for answers, for some trace of the daughter they lost. Seeing the man connected to her disappearance in handcuffs brought a mixture of relief, sorrow, and disbelief. Every memorial they had built, every scholarship and vigil, every quiet night spent wondering about Katrina's fate, now had a turning point. The knowledge that someone responsible for taking her from them had been found and would answer for his actions brought a semblance of closure that had eluded them for so long. As the investigation unfolded, the community grappled with the realization that Fletcher had been part of their lives, attending local church events and volunteering occasionally, while hiding his connection to a heinous crime. It forced Beaufort to reckon with the uncomfortable truth that even familiar faces might harbor secrets. Yet amidst the shock and betrayal there was hope, a hope built on the unwavering commitment of investigators, the resilience of a grieving family, and the slow but relentless march of technology that refused to let a crime remain unsolved. The cold case of Katrina Ellis, dormant for 15 years, had finally moved from mystery to resolution. The pieces, once scattered and inaccessible, were now part of a coherent story. The darkness of the unknown that had haunted her parents, her friends, and the small town of Beaufort began to lift, replaced by the long-awaited affirmation that truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of emerging. The arrest of Douglas Fletcher marked not just the end of a pursuit, but the restoration of a community's faith in justice, in persistence, and in the power of science to illuminate secrets that time had once seemed to conceal. The discovery that Douglas Fletcher's DNA matched the cells found on Katrina Ellis's purse sparked a flurry of activity in Beaufort. Law enforcement immediately began reviewing every aspect of his life, tracing movements, cross-referencing old tips, and re-examining any anomalies in the original investigation. In 2005, Fletcher had appeared cooperative, even courteous, whenever police spoke to him about Katrina's disappearance. He had been seen driving along the route she was last known to have walked, but at the time nothing had raised suspicion. With modern technology and the benefit of hindsight, investigators now saw the pattern clearly. Detective Samantha Rhodes led the team that retraced Fletcher's movements on the evening of September 3, 2005. By combining old security footage, witness statements, and newly acquired cell phone records, they reconstructed the moments leading up to Katrina's disappearance. Although cell towers were less precise back then, triangulation placed Fletcher's vehicle near the pharmacy parking lot between 7 and 7:20 p.m. The dark SUV seen lingering in the surveillance footage matched the make and model of Fletcher's vehicle, a 2000 Ford Explorer with a nearly identical paint job. Further analysis of lighting reflections in the footage revealed the vehicle's license plate partially, which, when combined, the team also delved into the witness reports that had been dismissed. In 2005, a delivery driver had noted seeing a woman matching Katrina's description, walking along the side street while a man in a dark SUV watched from his car. At the time, this had seemed like an incidental observation. Investigators now realized it aligned precisely with the reconstructed timeline. Another witness, a neighbor walking her dog, had noticed an unfamiliar vehicle parked unusually close to the curb, doors left slightly ajar, as though someone had just exited or been forced inside. These accounts, previously overlooked, now painted a chilling picture of what had likely occurred. Forensic teams returned to Katrina's purse, applying cutting-edge DNA analysis to areas that had previously yielded no results. Minute traces of Fletcher's DNA were discovered along the inner lining, suggesting repeated handling over a prolonged period. Fibers recovered from the strap matched the upholstery of Fletcher's vehicle, establishing a direct physical link. The combination of genetic evidence, fiber analysis, and video reconstruction left investigators confident that the case could no longer be classified as unsolved. While the scientific team worked in the lab, Rhodes and her colleagues turned their attention to Fletcher himself. Surveillance footage had captured his movements over several weeks, showing patterns that suggested awareness of the investigation's progress. He frequented local stores, seemingly observing community events, and appeared particularly attentive to media coverage of unsolved cases. Investigators noted that he often drove the same streets Katrina had walked, a detail that hinted at premeditation or obsession. In March 2020, Fletcher was formally charged with the abduction and murder of Katrina Ellis. The press conference held by the Beaufort Police Department drew intense local and national attention. Detectives presented the evidence gathered over the 15-year period, emphasizing the breakthrough role of forensic genetic genealogy and the meticulous preservation of Katrina's belongings. The story resonated widely because it highlighted the intersection of human perseverance and technological advancement, the way cold evidence, once thought irrelevant, could finally illuminate the truth. Preparation for trial revealed more about Fletcher's background. He had lived in Beaufort for most of his adult life, maintaining a low-profile existence that allowed him to blend seamlessly into the community. He was known for occasional volunteer work at a local community center and for participating in neighborhood watch programs. This duality, public civility masking private malevolence, echoed the experiences of many families of long-missing persons who had later discovered perpetrators among those they trusted. During interviews prior to his trial, Fletcher remained largely silent, offering minimal responses when questioned about the events of September 3, 2005. Detectives focused on corroborating the evidence rather than eliciting confessions. understanding that a single misstep could compromise the case. Each new revelation from the forensic team strengthened the prosecution's narrative. The DNA, the fibers, the enhanced video, the behavioral patterns, all pointed decisively toward Fletcher. Meanwhile, the Ellis family found themselves navigating a complex landscape of grief, relief, and residual trauma. Marlene Ellis, who had endured years of sleepless nights and unanswered questions, described the arrest as both a validation and a reopening of old wounds. "We finally know what happened," she said, voice wavering. "But knowing doesn't erase the years of fear and wondering. It doesn't bring Katrina back. Oh, it just tells us who took her from us." Peter Ellis echoed the sentiment, emphasizing that while the arrest provided closure, it also required confronting the reality that the man responsible had been present in their town, their streets, their community, for years without anyone suspecting. The trial began in late April 2020 at the Beaufort County Courthouse. Courtrooms overflowed with residents, reporters, and family members from neighboring towns. Prosecutor Andrea Sullivan presented a timeline constructed meticulously, integrating forensic science, witness statements, and historical evidence from the original 2005 investigation. Every detail was corroborated: the dark SUV at the pharmacy, the partial license plate, the fiber analysis linking Fletcher to Katrina's purse, and the genetic profile connecting him definitively to the crime. Key witnesses included the lab technicians who had extracted and analyzed the DNA, as well as Detective Rhodes herself, who outlined the process of tracing the suspect through genealogical databases. The courtroom was captivated by the technology's role in bridging a 15-year gap, illustrating how perseverance and innovation could solve crimes once thought impossible. As the trial progressed, the prosecution highlighted Fletcher's attempts to maintain an appearance of normalcy over the years. Surveillance footage from community events, volunteer activities, and neighborhood interactions was shown, depicting a man who had managed to insert himself into ordinary life while harboring a deadly secret. The contrast between Fletcher's public persona and the reality of his actions intensified the emotional weight of the proceedings. The defense attempted to cast doubt on the DNA analysis, questioning the reliability of degraded samples and the methods used in genetic genealogy. However, expert testimony reinforced the validity of the findings, explaining the stringent protocols followed in the lab, the replication of results, and the statistical certainty that Fletcher's DNA was present on the purse. Fiber evidence, witness corroboration, and video enhancement collectively overwhelmed the defense's claims, leaving the jury with little room for reasonable doubt. Throughout the trial, the Ellis family attended every session. They brought photographs of Katrina, letters she had written, and personal mementos to remind themselves and the court of the young woman behind the case. Marlene Ellis spoke to reporters outside the courthouse, saying, "Katrina had dreams, hopes, a life filled with laughter. We carry her memory, and now, thanks to the science and dedication of investigators, we know the truth." Community response was a mixture of vindication and shock. Residents who had known Fletcher described disbelief, struggling to reconcile the man they had seen in local events and daily life with the evidence presented in court. Local support groups and counseling services were mobilized to help neighbors process the revelations. Public meetings emphasized the importance of vigilance, awareness, and the understanding that even familiar faces can hide dangerous secrets. The trial's emotional apex came during the final days of testimony, when forensic experts detailed the extraction of minute DNA fragments and their subsequent analysis. They explained how even a single cell, preserved under the right conditions, could provide conclusive evidence, and how advancements in technology had allowed investigators to overcome decades-old obstacles. The jury listened intently, aware that they were witnessing a landmark example of modern forensic science resolving a long-standing mystery. After deliberating for several days, The jury returned a verdict of guilty on all counts. Fletcher was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The courtroom held a collective breath as the judge pronounced the sentence, acknowledging the pain endured by the Ellis family and the years of uncertainty they had suffered. For Marlene and Peter Ellis, the verdict represented justice, if not true solace. It validated years of perseverance, reaffirmed the importance of maintaining hope, and provided a measure of accountability for the life stolen from their family. The conclusion of the trial did not erase the past, but it marked a turning point. Beaufort could begin to heal, guided by the reassurance that even the most confounding mysteries could be unraveled. Katrina Ellis's story, long shrouded in uncertainty, now had a chapter of resolution. Her memory became a symbol of the intersection between persistence, science, and the human desire for justice. As forensic genetic genealogy continued to gain traction across the country, Katrina's case served as a model. Investigators and law enforcement agencies cited the success in Beaufort as evidence that cold cases, no matter how old or obscure, could be resolved. The Ellis family, while forever shaped by loss, found purpose in advocacy, speaking to law enforcement conferences, community groups, and students about the importance of preservation, reporting, and patience. The arrest and conviction of Douglas Fletcher provided the truth the family had long sought. It reminded Beaufort and the wider community that crimes, no matter how carefully concealed, leave traces that time cannot completely erase. Katrina's life, though tragically cut short, had inspired a relentless pursuit of justice that would benefit families and victims for years to come, ensuring that even in the darkest corners, truth could prevail. The aftermath of Douglas Fletcher's conviction rippled through Beaufort in ways that no one could have predicted. For years, the town had quietly lived with the knowledge that one of their own had been responsible for the disappearance of Katrina Ellis, yet the specifics remained shrouded in uncertainty. Families walked their streets a little more cautiously, neighbors regarded each other with subtle wariness, and the local police force carried the weight of unresolved questions that had lingered since 2005. Now, with Fletcher behind bars and the details of his crimes exposed, Beaufort could finally begin to process the impact on both personal and collective. Marlene Ellis and her husband Peter found themselves navigating a complicated terrain of emotions. Relief, grief, and residual trauma intertwined as they tried to reconcile 15 years of unanswered questions with the certainty of Fletcher's guilt. Marlene described it as a wave of both closure and new sorrow. Knowing who had taken their daughter brought answers, but it also reopened wounds that had never fully healed. Friends and extended family rallied around them, providing a network of support that helped them gradually reclaim a sense of normalcy. The trial and conviction also prompted introspection within the Beaufort Police Department. Detectives reflected on the original investigation, analyzing what had been missed and how modern forensic techniques could have accelerated resolution. The department instituted new protocols for cold cases, including mandatory reviews of unsolved disappearances every 5 years and the incorporation of emerging technologies like genetic genealogy. Officers spoke candidly about the emotional toll of revisiting traumatic events and the challenge of balancing community relations with investigative necessity. Community response was complex. Many residents expressed shock and disbelief that Fletcher, a man they had seen at community events and in volunteer programs, could commit such a crime. Neighborhood forums and town meetings became venues for dialogue about trust, vigilance, and the hidden nature of evil. Some families were inspired to revisit their own unresolved cases, providing tips or advocating for reinvestigation. Local schools and civic organizations held seminars on safety, awareness, and the role of forensic science in modern justice. Katrina's case became a catalyst for education, emphasizing the importance of preserving evidence and speaking up when something seemed amiss. The success of the case also drew national attention, particularly within law enforcement and forensic circles. Katrina Ellis's story was featured in professional journals and conferences, highlighting the use of genetic genealogy in cold case resolution. Experts analyzed the preservation of her purse, the collection of DNA, and the cross-referencing with genealogical databases, underscoring how meticulous evidence handling can bridge decades of investigative gaps. Detective Samantha Rhodes was invited to speak at several conferences, emphasizing the persistence required in cold case investigations and the value of combining traditional detective work with cutting-edge technology. Forensic science itself benefited from the case. Labs across the country cited Katrina Ellis's case as a prime example of how small biological traces, once overlooked, can be decisive. New guidelines were developed for revisiting unsolved cases, including more sensitive extraction methods, broader database comparisons, and improved archival storage. The methodology used in Beaufort became a template, showing that time alone cannot erase evidence if it is carefully preserved and analyzed with innovation. The psychological impact on survivors of long-term mysteries was another focus. Support groups for families of missing persons cited the Ellis family's experience as instructive, how hope, patience, and community engagement could sustain families through years of uncertainty. The narrative emphasized that closure is multifaceted. It comes not just from arrest and conviction, but also from understanding, acknowledgement, and communal recognition of loss. Marlene Ellis became a frequent speaker in these groups, sharing both her heartbreak and her advocacy for sustained investigative efforts. As months turned into years, Beaufort slowly began to heal. Memorials for Katrina were established, including a small garden in the town square, where residents could remember her life and reflect on the importance of vigilance and compassion. Local media documented the creation of the memorial, interviewing neighbors who recalled Katrina's warmth, laughter, and presence in the community. The garden became a symbol not only of remembrance, but also of the persistence of truth, standing as a testament to the idea that justice, however delayed, can eventually be realized. Legal scholars and journalists also examined the case, highlighting the ethical and procedural questions raised by genetic genealogy. Fletcher's prosecution had set precedents, illustrating both the power and responsibility inherent in modern DNA analysis. Debates emerged about privacy, consent, and the evolving landscape of law enforcement tools. Nonetheless, most agreed that the outcome of Katrina Ellis's case was a triumph of justice, demonstrating the capacity of law, science, and human perseverance to overcome time and deception. The story of Katrina Ellis and the resolution of her disappearance left a lasting legacy in Beaufort. Families of missing persons nationwide saw a renewed hope that cold cases could be solved, inspiring renewed efforts and community cooperation. Police departments began systematically reviewing long unsolved cases, recognizing that evidence, properly preserved and analyzed, could reveal the truth even decades later. The case served as a powerful example of how meticulous investigative work combined with technological innovation can bridge the gap between mystery and resolution. For the Ellis family, the legacy was deeply personal. They continued to honor Katrina's memory through advocacy, public speaking, and community engagement, ensuring that her life and the pursuit of justice for her remained central to local and national conversations about missing persons. Their story underscored the human dimension of criminal investigation, the interplay between grief, hope, persistence, and ultimately closure. Years later, Marlene reflected on the journey. Nothing can bring Katrina back, but knowing the truth allows us to live with our memories without wondering who did this. Justice doesn't erase the pain, but it gives meaning to our endurance. Beaufort itself changed too, becoming a town more aware of its vulnerabilities, yet more committed to community vigilance. The arrest and conviction of Douglas Fletcher demonstrated that even the most carefully hidden crimes leave traces, and that persistence, combined with advancing science, can illuminate truths once thought lost forever. Katrina Ellis's story became emblematic of the power of patience, science, and human determination. It showed that time does not weaken justice, it sometimes strengthens it, providing perspective, technology, and renewed attention. While the scars of loss remain, her legacy ensured that no question remained unanswered, no clue overlooked, and no effort in the pursuit of truth wasted. Beaufort had finally reclaimed a measure of peace, built upon the certainty that the person responsible had been held accountable, and that the memory of Katrina would continue to inspire vigilance, compassion, and relentless pursuit of justice for generations to come.